We also introduced a catch logbook to give out to members, so that I'm struggling to read it myself, but basically it explains everything that we wanted to get from it. So the day that was fished, fishing effort, which month, size of fish, was it fin clipped, was it not fin clipped, was it retained, what river conditions, and a list of little rules about the catch and everything else, which I must admit I can't read, so I can't really say a lot. But all these things came together along with this, which is Trout in the Classroom. And we moved with a bloke called Alan, can't remember his name now, Alan Sutty, exactly. And I started this as well with, you know, the school, and it all joined in with Manchester Anglers' work that they were ongoing with. So we started doing that and putting fish. Biggest job of this was, by now, trout and grayling strategy had kicked in, and we were moving away from potentially stocking with stock trout. So I was trying to catch wild brood stock to do this. So I started trying. And we also, at the same time, there's some old hatchery ponds on Manchester Anglers that had been taken over, the farmer owned them. So we started trying to rebuild them, and I got a grant through work to rebuild them. And the idea being that the brood stock that were caught, I could use some in the school to teach the kids and all the farmers and all the people around. But what were left over, I could put into here, and we could let them grow naturally and drop into the river. So I think the first year, I wouldn't like to think how many man hours I did trying to catch brood stock, because they just weren't there on the becks. But I reared about 2,500, and I put 30, 40 into Classroom for fish to watch, and others were released into here a later date. And there it goes, showing me pouring some nice fed fry into there. So that were done. We also built the outside, which you can't really see from here, but there's an outfall there. We had a go at trying to build some off-channel spawning areas, which I think they're good for growing food now, but they didn't really work for that, and lessons were learnt from that one. So a few statistics really. 2004, pre-fin clipping and marking, it showed that Manchester Anglers caught 403 trout. 2005, after we'd fin clipped them, 454 trout. These are what the results that came back from the logbooks. So 454 trout were caught, and that included 222 fin clip fish, so it's suggesting 50% of the rod catch. 2006, there was an outbreak of VHS at Saucefish farms, which meant that Manchester Anglers couldn't stock. But they still caught 290 trout. And the biggest thing there, excuse me, is that there were only 3 fin clip fish, so 3 of the stockfish from the previous years that were caught. It was a severe drought as well that year, so fishing effort would be reduced. So them figures started to tally. I think at that point, that's when the club, the committee, themselves recognised that, you know, even though they hadn't been able to stock, the catch wasn't significantly decreased. So then that's when they took that decision to, you know, to not stock. Excuse me, I'll just have a little drink. So they took that decision, which I said monumental, and I think it were. In 2007, they caught 350 trout. One of those was possibly fin clipped. Another key figure there is there were 8 taken for the table. And I think by 2008 going on, Manchester Anglers by then were pretty much at 100% catch and release, which is something else that I think's moving around the system now. Interesting points there also, the size of the fish. When we first started this, one of the things that I said was that if it's going to work, by common sense, if the stockfish that are going in, we're not finding them on reds, they're not spawning. So if I can increase the number of wild fish that will spawn on the spawning reds, then hopefully you'll get an increase in juvenile numbers. I said it wouldn't happen overnight, and it'd take quite a few years, and I think that started to build up after the first 3 or 4 years. Is that anglers out on river were reporting that they were going out and they were catching nothing but little fish, and at some points they were actually going home because they couldn't get through par. Well, to me that's music. They do now catch a lot more fish between the 8-inch to 3 pound range. You know, this is top at Ribble. It's not a big river. So that's what's happening there now. There are a couple of fish food for thought that anglers sent photographs to me of fish they'd caught. They were returned as well. But you know, why do you want a stock trout when you can go and catch one of them potentially? 2009-10. I'd already been discussing with Bob Garnett from Settle Anglers, you know, the work that was going on at Manchester, and the two clubs, you know, intrinsically joined by on the river. And I think also that Bob and some of the other committee members at the same time, they'd already started asking questions on their own stocking policies because of what were being said.